It's a pleasure to be with all of you this morning. And before I get started, I just want to take a brief second to thank James King and the entire KHL team really for the leadership and support to put this summit together, and all of the sponsors as well for making it possible. So thank you. Essentially what I'm going to talk about over the next 5 to 8 minutes, really some economic threats in the U.S., industry threats, industry priorities, and some SC&RA commitments. Ron will be going into far greater detail in some of these areas, and some of the other speakers will certainly be addressing some of these areas as well. First and foremost, the biggest threats to the U.S. economy right now as we see it, lack of leadership. James mentioned some of the problems within our administration and Congress. Absolutely, positively a key threat to the U.S. economy. Frankly, we think there's lack of leadership, and it doesn't stop at just the White House. It runs right through Congress. If many of you who've been following the U.S. Government and markets over the past couple months, you know that the U.S. government was shut down for 2.5 weeks just recently, and it was all about raising the debt ceiling, how far, when, etc. And the plain and simple reality is that issue has been kicked down the road until January, at which time, in case we will see the same political debates. And boiling right down, the bottom line is politics and egos have gotten in the way of progress in the United States. And if we as voters don't hold our elected officials accountable and move forward, this issue and problem will certainly continue to create economic challenges for the United States in the global market. Next, the reality is we need strong government, we need strong leadership. Top priority for us right now, we need a highway bill. We need infrastructure spending. As you all know, if you're a manufacturer, infrastructure spending is great for crane sales, truck sales, equipment sales. Infrastructure spending is great for the companies that operate cranes and trucks and lifting gear. It's great for our industry. More importantly, poor infrastructure prohibits the U.S. from really competing aggressively in a global economy. So that is a top priority. We're hoping to see a highway bill in our next legislative session next year. It's certainly something that SC&RA with our U.S. partners, other associations, et cetera, will be pushing. The fragile and uncertain global economy. Dominic spoke briefly, James touched on it. The reality is China has cooled. Latin America is not where economists predicted 2 and 3 years back. Overall growth of the emerging markets is not on target. North America and Europe are on about a 1.5 to 3.2% growth pace, and that's for perhaps the next 18 months. You can come up and down a point as different economists see it, but that's the current snapshot. Mauro Ghilan is a management professor, Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania, and if you take just a quick second to read a couple of his recent quotes that have been posted, you'll see what this boils down to. The bottom line is the emerging economies over the past few years have really focused on export-led growth, and many economists around the world believe that in order for the emerging markets to snap out, they've got to take an introspective look, view, and energy on developing within their own economies and markets. Industry threats, empty seats. Reality is we've got, and we're facing greater shortages of operators, drivers, mechanics, and welders. We have, in many cases around the world, failed to prepare, recruit, and retain young talent. We need future industry leaders. different companies around the world have certainly done a little bit more, some a little bit less, but it is a huge threat to our industry over the next 5, 10, and 15 years if we don't aggressively address this issue. If you look at the demographics of the workforce, certainly in the United States, it's an aging demographic, and we need to bring in folks in their 20s and 30s to feed the process. I know Emma O'Dwyer is going to talk about women in the workforce, and those opportunities, certainly an important element that needs to be factored in and introduced. We've got a shortage of qualified labor, and again, in the next 5, 10, and 15-year business cycles, it's only going to get worse if we as an industry around the globe don't address it. Employers need to partner with trade and technical schools aggressively to bring the younger workforce in. Employers need to get involved with, in the U.S., more and more high school career days at the local level and educate students, younger students, on industry opportunities. They can be opportunities from skilled to accounting, finance, engineering, sales, you name it, but unless our members in companies around the world don't go out and engage in that educational process to help bring in the younger workforce, again, we will be hurting. Unions need to enhance and increase their training centers and apprenticeship programs, and many companies, certainly within the United States, I don't know how aggressively in other countries around the world, but many of our member companies are engaging more in military recruitment, visiting outplacement centers, and finding the military to be a good source of recruiting to address many of the challenges. We're competing with other industries, and we've got to act. We're competing for talent in other industries, the computer industry, plumbing industry, HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and manufacturing. Right now, if you go to career days, trade shows around the country, visit high schools, all these other industries are in aggressively educating high school students on what they have to offer and what they have to offer in all types of positions, and that's who we're competing against. And they're spending money to be there, to educate, to advertise, and if this industry doesn't snap to and do more, those are the industries that are going to beat us for the next generation of talent. Dropping down from broader 30,000 feet into more ground level SC&RA, before I turn it over to Ron, SC&RA, we just finished a strategic planning process in August. We sent information out to a number of our members and asked our board members for input on kind of what they thought our strategic vision should be for the next 3 to 4 year cycle. And first off, coming back after the process, very important that we maintain very fundamental values. SC&RA is 65 years old right now. We've got 1,300 member companies from 46 nations around the globe, and if we're going to continue to grow and be healthy, we've got to focus on fundamentals. We've got to focus on creating results and creating value for our members. There's certainly a push to maintain ethics and integrity as we continue, and to focus on visionary leadership. We can't do any of that without the support and participation from other associations, members around the world, opportunities like this for us to be educated, learn, and exchange information. So again, we appreciate the opportunity to be here. Further information from the strategic planning process. Advocacy is really what SC&RA's core mission and focus is. We're working to serve as the foremost industry voice on regulatory and legislative matters, develop quality products and services, maintain international presence and support industry partners, and communications, promote our accomplishments and brand, not only in the United States, but abroad, and certainly membership expansion is always part of our core focus and goals. Our commitment as we move forward, we have every desire and intention to continue to work with our industry partners around the globe to promote, number one, safety, uniformity and harmonization, efficiency and profitability. And second, we maintain our strong commitment to continue to share information and strategies to promote best practices that contribute to a stronger industry at large. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron, and we appreciate the time to be with you here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel, and some interesting information that you've brought up there. You know, that Fed government shutdown for 2.5 weeks when the government could have been concentrating on bigger issues, unemployment, and also getting people into the careers that need to attract talent. So it's a theme I think that's going to come up throughout the next 2 days. And we're going to continue with that US perspective because our next speaker, as we've already heard, is Ron Montgomery. And Ron is president of the Intermountain Rigging and Heavy Haul and also president of the Specialized Carriers and Rigging Association, or as Joel referred to it, the SC&RA. Now, Ron began his career with Savage Industries before moving on to his current position with Intermountain Rigging and Heavy Haul. His responsibility is very wide, and I know we've got full details of that in the programs that you've all been given when you first arrived here. In the meantime, let's find out a little bit more about the US, and welcome to the stage, Ron Montgomery.
Thank you, Nadine, and thank you for being here. Good morning. As mentioned in the introduction, I'm Ron Montgomery with Intermountain Rigging and Heavy Haul out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm currently serving as president of the Specialized Carriers and Rigging Association, and my involvement with the SC&RA has allowed me to go places like Aruba, Maui, Cabo, and now here to Amsterdam. I'm honored to have the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you today. Coming from a relatively small and very conservative Utah, this being my first trip to Amsterdam is one I won't soon forget, I'm sure. When I arrived yesterday, I took the opportunity to take a nice stroll through your city and see some of the sights. And it's a beautiful city, and thank you for your hospitality. It's great to be here. You know, this group is really responsible for moving the world. You do some amazing projects, and hopefully I can present something today that will be interesting and informative to you. I'd like to address a few challenges that affect how we do business, mostly in the U.S., but I think it spills over into the European market as well. First, I'd like to talk about the decline of the health of the infrastructure, and with my focus and my interest in transportation, I'll focus mainly on bridges today. Second, our available pool of drivers and operators is declining, and what can we do about that? And third, the lack of uniformity between states in the U.S. and also in countries in Europe. And fourth, government regulations. Where's my clicker? Is it this?
That's it, yeah, that's it. If you just press that one there forward. Do you want to go forward?
Beauty.
Okay. That's it.
There we go. The American Society of Civil Engineers, the ASCE, has given the nation's infrastructure a grade of C+ for bridges and D+ overall. What does that mean for us as we are asked by our customers to move larger and heavier loads? It seems as though if we could move 300 tons on the last trip, this time they're asking for 350 tons. You know, we don't just make this stuff up. Our customers want us to move loads in the largest and heaviest configurations possible. There are over 600,000 bridges on the highway system in the U.S. So as we move these super loads, we're going to encounter a substantial number of bridges along the route. With the grade barely above passing for the bridges we cross daily, what does that mean for us as we attempt to move these super loads across the country? And what does it mean for the future of our business? I was curious what impact this has on my company where we operate locally, so I looked up the bridges in Utah's Salt Lake County. where RH operates. In Salt Lake County, there are 851 bridges. 13 of those bridges are structurally deficient, and 39 of them are functionally obsolete. Now, structurally deficient bridges are bridges that require significant maintenance, rehabilitation, or replacement. These bridges must be inspected at least every year, since critical load-carrying elements were found to be in poor condition due to deterioration or to damage. Functionally obsolete bridges are bridges that no longer meet the current standards that are used today. Examples may be narrow lanes or low load-carrying capacity. Now, Utah is a wide-open state with relatively few bridges, so I thought I'd take a look at the Houston, Texas port area, where we also do a lot of business. In Harris County, Texas, near the Port of Houston, there are 4,845 bridges. 31 of these bridges are deficient, and 1,300 are functionally obsolete. When we have a superload move in Texas, the bridges on the route need to be analyzed, and if they don't pass the review, we have to reroute and try again. This is a time-consuming and expensive process that can take up to 60 days or more in Texas. The bridges on the route are sent to an independent engineer for his evaluation, and this engineer will either pass or fail the bridge. And if a bridge fails, the process starts over again. With this many bridges and so many being deficient, it can be a real challenge getting an approved route. The reality is we need to cross bridges to move these large loads. Sometimes it requires special configurations just to cross the bridge. At times we've had to add up to 20 dollies to a load just to cross a bridge. We'd spend several hours to attach the dollies to the load, cross the bridge, then remove the dollies, go to the next bridge and repeat the process. And sometimes we just have to find another bridge that'll work. And what are the statistics that stand out as we look at the health of the infrastructure in our nation? In 2012, 1 in 9, or about 11% of bridges in the U.S. were structurally deficient. That means that most likely on a fairly long route, we're going to encounter a number of deficient bridges. We'll either have to change our configuration for these bridges, temporarily support the bridge, or we'll need to find another route. Over 200 million trips are taken daily across deficient bridges in the nation's 102 largest metropolitan areas. Now, that 200 million sounds like a lot, but that's cars, trucks, and everything. But that's a lot of trips across deficient bridges. These bridges need to be inspected yearly because of their rating. And the danger is that on the next inspection, the bridge may fail. And even though you've crossed that bridge a few weeks ago, it may not be an option this time. We had this very scenario happen to our company on a load we had in Long Beach, California. We had a permit and were ready to depart the following night when we got a call from Caltrans, the permitting agency in California, saying that the bridge on our route, one bridge on our route, had failed an annual inspection and had been derated to 246,725 pounds gross, which is the maximum weight allowed on a 9-axle in California. Our gross weight was over 700,000 pounds, so obviously we were not going to cross that bridge. The real problem is that at our loaded height of 24 feet 6 inches, this was the only route out of the Long Beach area. And after a delay of about 2 weeks, several trips to California surveying alternate routes, and even looking at temporarily supporting the bridge, we found a solution. The solution included using a bypass to get past the bridge, but then we had to back this 300-foot-long trailer partially onto the bridge that had failed, and then proceed forward, crossing the center median and back onto the freeway. One of the restrictions of our permit was that we could not stop during this process. If you think about that restriction, you might ask, how do you go from going in reverse to going forward without stopping? Well, we have very creative drivers and almost made that happen. And we got across with 2 loads, but 3 years later, that bridge is still restricted and can't go over it with heavy loads. The average age of the nation's 607,380 bridges is currently 42 years. Without the proper care and maintenance, these bridges will continue to show their age, and more of them will fail. Some of the upgrades are relatively simple, such as adding supports to the bridge or refinishing the spalling concrete. But some can be very complex. For example, if the lanes are too narrow, the entire bridge may need to be widened. In extreme cases, the bridge may need to be completely replaced. The Federal Highway Administration estimates that the U.S. government would need to invest $20.5 billion annually to eliminate the deficient bridges, while currently only $12.8 billion is being spent. It's easy to see that at this rate, we're falling behind pretty quickly. So what can we learn from these statistics? Without increased spending, the problem will only get worse. This may be an extreme example on this bridge, but by doing what we're currently doing to upgrade bridges, this is where we are headed. It could become very difficult to find a route for the large loads our customers depend on us to move on a daily basis. Generators do not get to power plants, vessels do not get to refineries, and other large construction and mining and manufacturing components do not get where they're going and where they're needed without trucking over the road, which includes over these aging bridges. It is an ongoing issue that needs to be addressed. As specialized carriers, we need to let our voice be heard. The SC&RA advocates prudent spending to address infrastructure concerns. We know it will take time, but as an industry, we need to keep the pressure on those determining where our tax dollars are spent to make improving our infrastructure a priority. As we saw in an earlier report, the U.S. would need to spend an additional $8 billion annually to make the necessary improvements. According to ULI and Ernst & Young's Infrastructure 2012 annual report, European nations are struggling to move forward with infrastructure investments in light of the global economic downturn and European financial crisis. Although, like in previous years, the 2012 report stresses that the U.S. continues to lag behind its global competitors in infrastructure funding, it also points to a marked spending decline in Europe. But even with the recent economic struggles, it looks like Europe still leads the U.S. in infrastructure funding, but we all need to be diligent in protecting our infrastructure and maintaining it. Second on my agenda is the dwindling pool of available drivers and operators. The American Trucking Association predicts that by 2022, there will be a shortfall of 239,000 truck drivers. America's trucking industry has been experiencing a shortage of drivers for at least 20 years. Conservative estimates put the number of vacancies now upward of 25,000 and not enough qualified people to fill them. And that's just for the general over-the-road trucking. We all know how difficult it is to find qualified drivers for a load like this group hauls on a daily basis. You don't just put anyone in a truck that pulls a load like this. It takes years of experience and training to safely move these oversized, overweight combinations. The process to qualify a driver at our company to pull a load like this is first to spend some time assisting on the crew. He may pull one of our accessory loads and help with the turns and logistics on the move. Once he's had some experience, we'd have him in a push truck as one of our push truck drivers. And after some time as a push truck driver, he may pull the trailer empty. We call it with training wheels on. And if he does okay with the training wheels on a few times, and he seems to have the aptitude, he's then allowed to pull the loaded unit with some supervision. This process may take years to complete, and it's an expensive and time-consuming process to get a driver qualified to move these superloads. And I shudder to think what might happen if an undertrained or inexperienced driver made a serious mistake on a project like this one. What are some of the reasons we're facing this shortfall in drivers? The average age of a truck driver in the U.S. is 55 years. Bloomberg reports that in Germany, 40% of the country's truck drivers are due to retire in the next decade, which puts them in about the same age bracket as U.S. drivers, and I'm sure that these numbers will be consistent throughout Europe. That means without an influx of younger drivers in the next 10 years, we'll experience a real shortage of drivers. Another factor is the turnover in drivers, which in the U.S. is 98%. And according to this picture, maybe we're working these guys too hard. In the specialized transportation industry, we found that the turnover rate is much lower, but still an issue. Drivers always hear that Company X is paying more than Company Y, so it seems the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. We need to compensate our drivers fairly, take good care of them, and keep them around. As mentioned earlier, it's very time-consuming and expensive to train new drivers, so we need to keep the good ones happy. Another factor, and it's been talked about, is that the upcoming generation is learning the uses of technology as toddlers, and that's where they will head as they make career choices. Our 4-year-old granddaughter consistently shows her grandmother how to operate her smartphone and her iPad, and how to turn on the complicated projector and sound system in our theater. This generation has dreams of inventing the next multi-billion-dollar internet company or the next generations of smartphones, not so much in being the next great truck driver. Somehow we need to attract the younger generation into our profession. Another issue is more stringent requirements for hiring new drivers and CSA monitoring of driver violations and histories that are disqualifying many drivers in the U.S. In Europe, recruitment has been complicated by German laws introduced in 2009 that compel would-be drivers to garner qualifications in such areas as custom formalities and fuel-efficient driving, as well as in traffic laws and road safety. According to a Bloomberg report, the total cost for gaining a commercial driving license can reach €8,000, and people caught working without necessary certificates can be fined up to €5,000. Well, it's good for the industry and the safety of the motoring public to get unsafe drivers off the road, and we support CSA requirements and other monitoring and training initiatives. It still has a limiting effect on the pool of drivers available. So what can we do to keep our businesses from looking like this with unseated trucks sitting on the fence due to the lack of qualified drivers? As mentioned earlier, we need to educate the community. They need to understand the need for qualified drivers. Product does not get to the shelf or to the refinery or the power plant without trucks. As industry, we need to promote the profession and attract the younger workforce. German rail company Deutsche Bahn AG's DB Schenker unit, one of the larger suppliers of overland transport in Europe, has resorted to a radio campaign to attract new truckers while also approaching high school graduates as potential, quote, captains of country roads, emphasizing both the demanding nature of long-distance driving and what it calls the romance of trucking. Along with the previously mentioned recruiting methods, as Joel mentioned, companies can participate in career days at local trade and vocational schools, sponsor scholarships, and provide internship opportunities for students. The SC&RA Foundation awarded 16 scholarships and grants in 2013 to students pursuing careers in the industry. The foundation receives donations from member companies and from fundraising events at the SC&RA functions. These scholarships and grants have been awarded for over 25 years, and more than $336,000 has been awarded by the foundation to students interested in our industry since 1986. The bottom line is, as industry, we need to be proactive in promoting our industry in a positive light and as a career that would be considered as a good option by the next generation, and do what we can to attract young and qualified drivers. The next issue I'd like to talk about, especially in the U.S., is uniformity or ununiformity. Another challenge we have is the lack in uniformity and regulations from state to state in the U.S., and I'm sure from country to country in Europe is an equal challenge. Some of the issues are allowable axle weights, pilot car requirements, hours of operation, and length of time a permit is valid. For example, in the chart on the screen, a load weighing 170,000 pounds going from California to the East Coast would have to start out in California on a trunnion 9-axle shown at the top of the screen. It would then need to be transferred to a 13-axle in the center drawing. That 13-axle would not work in California as they don't allow us enough weight on triremes. We'd have to transfer that at the New Mexico or Colorado border, depending on the route. And then once you get it to Oklahoma and go further east, the load would have to be transferred again to this time to a 19-axle. To get to the East Coast. Added costs include staging of the trailers at different locations, cranes to make the transfer, and downtime waiting to transfer the load. It makes transporting large loads across many states very expensive and very inefficient. This map demonstrates the differences in allowable weights on a 6-axle unit in the U.S. SC&RA staff and volunteer committee members meet regularly with state and federal agencies to effect change and strive for uniformity. The map on the screen has been very helpful in educating state officials and helping make our case for uniformity. This is a weight map, and as you can see, the maximum weight on 6 axles varies from 100,000 pounds to 132,000 pounds. As a state official sees that his or her state is a barrier state or very different from the surrounding states, sometimes changes are easier to come by. This map shows the maximum widths that are permitted in each state. As you can see, a lot of different colors on the map. These widths can be exceeded with the addition of police escorts or other restrictions, but these are the normally permitted widths. The lack of uniformity makes it difficult as we bid a move. These differences have to be considered, and we have to know where we need additional escorts, police escorts, or night moves, and accurately determine the cost that's involved with that decision. This map shows the allowable permitted weight for a tandem axle in each state, and I show this map because it's a lot different than the map that we had 10 years ago. It's changed for the better over the last few years as a result of consistent efforts by SC&RA staff and dedicated volunteer committee members. With the new hours of service regulations and the coming of the requirement to have electric onboard recorders in trucks, we have to retrain our drivers and rethink how we do business to stay in compliance and be profitable at the same time. With our aging pool of drivers, this new technology can be like teaching an old dog new tricks, and it's an ongoing process, and those companies that are proactive and innovative will be the successful ones. One of the challenges we have at IRH is that most of our moves are restricted to very short windows of operation due to permit restrictions. And we also use the same crew that transports the load to place it on the foundation, so drivers may be only actually driving for a short period of time each day. With the new hours of service rules and the restrictive reset requirements for those hours of service, the issue we have is at the end of a job, even though our drivers have spent very little time in a truck driving, they are, quote, out of hours and may have to sit a few days before they can demobilize. We all have plenty of challenges in this business, but as we continually adapt and change with each new obstacle we face, we will hopefully be stronger and more efficient in the future. You in this room are the leaders in the world in this industry, and I'm sure you've all considered these challenges your companies face and have adapted over the years. That's why you're successful. I appreciate the opportunity I've had to visit with you today, and I think there will be time for questions later, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.